with Sam Seder.
The destiny of America is always safer in the hands of the people than in the conference rooms of any elite.
Sam Seder.
They are unanimous in their hate for me, and I welcome their hatred.
We must guard against the acquisition of unwarranted influence, whether sought or unsought, by the military-industrial complex.
The Majority Report with Sam Seder.
And I get the feeling you've been cheated.
It is Tuesday, March 26, 2024. My name is Sam Seder. This is the five-time award-winning Majority Report. We are broadcasting live steps from the industrially ravaged Gowanus Canal in the heartland of America, downtown Brooklyn, USA. On the program today, despite all of the obvious evidence, Secretary of State Blinken certifies that Israel is not in violation of U.S. and international law regarding allowing aid to reach Gaza or its conduct of the war. Meanwhile, the New York Times backtracks on some of the sexual assault claims of October 7th. A UK court finds Julian Assange can appeal his extradition. New poll shows Biden seeing a bump in swing states post State of the Union. And the Francis Scott Key Bridge collapses after being struck by a container ship in Maryland. Total collapse. As we speak, the Supreme Court is hearing a mifepristone case and questioning whether an 1876 law that keeps you from sending lewd and lascivious things through the mail will carry the day. Vladimir Putin concedes that a terror attack was in fact from ISIS-K. Florida passes a bill prohibiting, or I should say a law prohibiting, children 13 and younger from creating social media profiles, requiring parental permission at ages 14 and 15, and Elon Musk's lawsuit versus an anti-extremism watch group completely collapses. Lastly, RFK to choose a millionaire Silicon Valley lawyer and donor to his campaign, his running mate. All this and more on today's Majority Report. Welcome, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you so much. It is, in fact, Emma.
Newsday Tuesday.
Newsday Tuesday.
Hello, everybody.
I have to say, who better than a donor to make your vice president? Because
not Jesse Ventura, then
Ask not what
somebody
your
with both
country-
executive experience and called for a ceasefire.
well, but here's the point: we're all worried about money influencing in politics. Well, you don't have to worry about it if you're donating to yourself.
Yes.
Bingo, bango. There
Ask
you go.
not what your country can do for you, but what your donors can do for your campaign prospects.
What's the name of this guy?
It's actually a woman.
Lady.
excuse
showing
me.
She
Your
is,
bias.
Venture capital. Sorry.
well,
Why, you're not leaning in hard enough.
she her name is Nicole Shanahan. She is the ex-wife of Google co-founder Sergey Brin. So there's a lot of cashola associated with that, I suspect. Not to mention, if you're a Silicon Valley lawyer, you probably have made a lot. She, I think, donated, what was it, $1 million to the ad, the Super Bowl ad? Was it $1 million? I don't know how much it was, but she had donated to that.
So intimately involved in the campaign.
So she like a good ex-wife, unlike Jeff Bezos's, or what's the situation? Or
No, you have it reversed. Isn't
really?
Jeff Bezos' ex the one that's donating half of her, like all of her money?
I mean, like good from from the right wing perspective.
Oh,
I see
yeah.
what you're-
Yeah.
That's what I meant. Yeah.
Oh, I think that really this is a pick that is really more about generating funds.
Yeah.
I mean, she has no political experience. She's been
Outsider.
she has been a lawyer for Silicon Valley. I don't know who she's represented in the past. There is no indication that she is in any way prepared to be the vice president of the United States. However, it does seem like she is prepared to fund the hell out of the campaign. And look, there is I want to just be clear on this. There's a precedent. I can't remember which one of the Koch brothers it was, but bought his way on to the vice presidency of the Libertarian ticket. I think it was in 1980. Somebody look this up. I can't remember the exact specifics.
Oh, the Coke?
Yes.
Yes. Yeah.
And so there's a precedent for this. It's not a crazy, wacky idea.
Yeah.
And I think she has made it clear that she does not consider herself an anti-vaxxer, but she does think that the increase of vaccine-related injuries is very alarming. Yeah. And I do think we need to understand the screening mechanisms, which of course is code for, I'm an
anti-vaxxer.
Venture capital just keeps giving and giving.
I mean, shouldn't it be a little alarming if you guys are a committed anti-vaxxer that the champions of your movement from a political perspective can never be forthright about what they're advocating for? It's always, I'm not anti-vaccine, but then this is the list of ways that we need to look into why vaccines are a problem.
Totally. Sam from Ottawa says, didn't RFK walk back and apologize for the Super Bowl ad? Sort of. I mean, when some of the rest of the family were like, this is one of the most offensive things we've ever seen, he said, I didn't have anything to do with it. It was my outside expenditure group. Meanwhile,
he quote tweeted it.
Meanwhile, it wasn't even quote tweeted. It was pinned. It was his pinned tweet.
Sorry about this.
Look, I didn't do it, but it's not like I'm going to walk away from the opportunity. But nevertheless, he has appointed her, and he was under the gun because apparently they filed all their signatures in Nevada, and you only need about 15,000, I think it is, to get on the ballot. But they filed them without when you're running third party, you have to name your nominee. Your vice presidential nominee, and he didn't do that because he obviously didn't have one. So they may have to refile all of the signatures again or recollect them. I imagine they'll be able to do that, and I imagine she's going to bring in a huge amount of cash to do that. I mean, I think it's conceivable that she's a really smart person, and I would imagine she is. It is inconceivable that she has any governmental experience, any political experience. I mean, it's not, she has no sort of political constituency. It seems like quite obvious. Who can I pick who's smart and will donate a lot of money to this campaign? And,
not necessarily in that order.
Well, I mean, it's not hard to find both of those things, but maybe the part about in some vague vaccine skepticism might help. But that's that. So we can all now rest assured. Apparently, Kennedy had also spoken to Scotty B in Massachusetts, Scott Brown, because the dude did have a pickup truck. So why wouldn't you? He was par excellence in terms of being a senator. And then I believe he was an ambassador to, what was it? Like Nevis? Or where was he? Can someone look that up? Scotty B? Scott Brown. Where? Australia? Oh, yeah, that's right. It's true. He was in Australia.
Excuse me, New Zealand and Samoa. Apologies.
Okay, well, all right, it's close. They had a similar
He probably
accent.
made the same mistake.
I was hanging out in
upstate in Australia.
I was like partying in Sydney, and they're just like, "Where are you?" And I'm like, "I'm here." And like, "You need me to go to Canberra? Because I'll go."
I already
and
flew
they're
24
like,
hours,
dude, it's New Zealand, not Australia. He also spoke with Tricia Lindsay, a lawyer who has fought vaccine mandates.
Coincidence.
Course,
Also Tulsi Gabbard. But it turns out none of these people are multimillionaires. So,
right.
what are you going to do?
Right.
But he also did talk to Mike Rowe, the host of the television
Look, the
program,
ultimate dirty job is
Dirty
being
Jobs.
president of the United States.
Exactly. Vroom, vroom. All right, that's the...
I mean, Aaron Rodgers had the money, but yeah, I guess that's true. He's got the money.
All right, let's get to... speaking of money, Donald Trump was in front of appeared in front of a court yesterday. Well, I think he appeared in front of a couple, but at the very least, a New York State appeals court said that he does not have to provide $454 million as a bond. And understand what's happening here. A judgment, he has been found guilty of civil violation, his corporation of defrauding or of him being engaged in defrauding people. Based upon the valuations of his properties, he would give one for one set of people where it would benefit him, and he'd give another one for another set of people.
Including the government.
And
paying less on his taxes, underinflating what he had. Or that's a contradiction, but you know what I mean. Undervaluing. Yes.
Exactly. The verdict was that he needs to pay $454 million in fines. I think there may be some interest associated with that, but let's just let him off the hook for that for the moment. And the idea was like, well, he wants to appeal, but in a case like this, to appeal, you need to put up a bond, essentially like a loan, if you will, that is not recoupable if you lose your appeal. It's only recoupable if you do, but you got to cover these, you got to pay the money. And he said, well, I can't afford to pay all of that right now in time for an appeal. So the court said, well, it's 174 then million. And you have, I think it was like 10 days to file that appeal till April 5th. So if he doesn't do it by then he's just got to pay the 450. Here he is when asked, speaking to reporters after having his bond reduced and giving an extension to post it. Here he is asked, would you ever accept money from a foreign government to pay the bond or your fines? Now, of course, he's a multi-billionaire. Why would he not immediately say like, hey, I'm running for president of the country. I'm not going to accept money from a foreign country. That would be absurd. I mean, how much in debt would I have to be? I ran my whole campaign the first time by saying I'm not in debt to rich people because I'm rich. And so I don't need to take their campaign money. It turns out that's not what he said.
Would you ever accept money from a foreign government to pay the bond or your fines or?
No, I don't do that. I think you'd be allowed to, possibly. I don't know. I mean, if you go borrow from a big bank, many of the banks are outside of this. As you know, the biggest banks, frankly, are outside of our country. So you could
because
do that,
of Joe
I don't need
Biden.
to borrow money. I have a lot of money. I built a great company.
There you go. So if you wanted that straight, clear, absolutely not. Of course, I would be beholden to any type of foreign national that might loan me that money.
Which is interesting because they're accusing, without evidence, Joe Biden of that exact same thing.
Yeah, except for it involved a fake $5 million as opposed
never
to
existed.
Real $200 million, $400 million.
And this is the guy that we should note said, Russia, if you're listening, please hack emails, right? That's what he said about Hillary Clinton. So he's shown a willingness to work with to work with others.
Yes.
Yeah, Deutsche Bank.
It's called cooperation, international cooperation. I got to say, he looks as old as I've ever seen him look in this. Doesn't he?
Yeah.
He looks gaunt.
Yeah.
Oh, you know what that is? I know what that is. Ozempic.
Oh.
Yeah. Also, like when this lighting is not good for him because it goes right into his gaseous sort of hair and makes it look like a halo.
But also, look at his face. I mean, he looks like he's just lost a considerable amount of weight very quickly.
I mean, it can be stressful for him. He's not the kind of guy that wants to go and beg actual rich guys like Elon Musk for money and say, I'll do anything for you. It's not in his DNA.
So I've had his life like basically like floated off of a bunch of real estate and money from his dad, but to always be like able to get stuff from the banks, but to be this old and still having to be like, I need to get some money together. You got to be a weird kind of hell.
Well, he made a bet in 2016, like that book Devil's Bargain, basically, which talked about it a lot. How he'd never really thought he would win. He just thought this was a branding exercise for him. And that's why things were not buttoned up in the way they should have been. And just by his nature as a crook, he's in a situation where he can't get out of it.
Please let this be a video.
Oh, yeah. Hold on.
Please let this be a video. Sorry, that's just a photo. Just to make the point, we're coming upon, isn't Good Friday? Is Good Friday this Friday?
Yes.
Okay, Good Friday is this Friday to all is it Christians? All the Christians who celebrate Good Friday? I thought it was just Catholics. It doesn't matter. The point is...
I'm a Catholic, so I don't know.
This is extremely... It's a Holy Week is coming up. I think many of you might be giving up some food for Lent or something like that.
Going to Long John Silver's.
And Donald Trump wants you to celebrate it. And let's be clear, he is not... in any way have a problem with getting cash. This is Donald Trump on Truth. Oh, which incidentally is public today. So if you want to buy some Truth Social, I think you can. Can you buy some stock in this?
Yeah.
At least, I don't know if it's publicly traded. Is it publicly traded? You should just know before you buy that the revenue was something like maybe $1.5 million last year, but and it only took them $46 million to raise that.
That's
revenue.
so odd. That's
the
so
stock
odd.
numbers are DJT, the initials.
By the way, Trump owns 60% of Trump Media, or roughly $78 million shares. So, sorry, 78 million shares, I should say. So he has a
stake. Get these shares.
They're worth like $3.5 billion.
He has an interest in this going public.
But folks, and I wonder if you get one of these free if you buy enough shares. Here you go.
I'm proud to be partnering with my very good friend Lee Greenwood, who doesn't love his song God Bless the USA, in connection with promoting the God Bless the USA Bible. This Bible is the King James Version and also includes our founding father documents, yes, the Constitution, which I'm fighting for every single day, very hard. To keep Americans protected. Also, the Bill of Rights, the Declaration of Independence, and the Pledge of Allegiance are all part of this. God bless the USA Bible.
You know, I didn't want to make this about this, but this whole combining of the Bible and the Constitution and all the other civic sort of like documents of our life in one bound, easy to use, just in case you get confused. There's a word for that, and it's called the theocracy.
Convenient.
It's also explicitly...
But don't worry, I barely believe in any. The important part is that you look upon me as God.
It's also contradictory if we're putting the Constitution and the Bible in the same situation. I mean, there's an establishment clause. I don't know if he's aware of that.
That's overrated.
For one low price, you can get all these public domain works.
Exactly. Bound up. How much is it?
We got to go to GodBlessTheUSABible.com.
Let's see how much we're going to pay for this thing.
Lee Greenwood.
There he is.
Who's that dude? Is that Lee Greenwood?
Yeah.
Jesus, he doesn't look very good either.
$60.
$60.
Scroll up to Lee Greenwood.
That's nothing.
He
Wow,
looks like
that's
the,
cheap. That's going to be
restaurant guy in Sopranos.
He does.
All right. Let's do this from the sponsors, and we get some other news to get to here. Oh, hey, today's sponsor is from the best way to learn another language. What is the best way to learn a language? It's called immersion. That's where you live where the language is spoken and use it every day. But chances are, many of us, we can't do that. But you can still learn a language the second best way, and that's with Babbel. Babbel is super easy to use. En fact, estoy aprendiendo español y I can't pronounce it. Divertendome.
Oh, okay.
Mm-hmm. It's so easy to pick up. It's super easy to pick up on how to order food, ask for directions, speak to merchants. You don't have to consult the language app. You don't have to hold your phone up, look like a ding-dong. Plus, Babbel's speech recognition technology helps you improve your pronunciation and accent. Be a better you in 2024 with Babbel. I have to say, there are times where I feel like the thing gets frustrated with me.
Yeah.
Because I can't even, there's like, I don't know, 25% of English things I can't pronounce. But it has patience, I will say that. It is a science-backed language learning app that actually works. You don't have to pay hundreds of dollars for private tutors. You don't have to waste hours on apps that don't really help you speak the language. The beautiful thing about Babbel is it's got 10-minute lessons, essentially. And you could squeeze them in anywhere. 10 minutes is about, like, for me at this point, about as long as I have in terms of an attention span to be able to do this. But you learn it, you build over time. And these lessons are handcrafted by over 200 language experts. And you can start speaking this language within as early as 3 weeks. Babbel's designed by real people for real conversations. Babbel's tips and tools are approachable, they're accessible, and they are rooted, again, in real-life situations. They're delivered with conversation-based teaching, so you're ready to practice what you've learned in the real world. They've done studies from Yale, Michigan State University, and others continue to prove that Babbel is better. One study found that using Babbel for 15 hours is equivalent to a full semester at college. I'm going to talk to Milo about that because Babbel is significantly less expensive than college. Babbel has over 16 million subscriptions sold, plus all of Babbel's 14 award-winning language courses are backed by their 20-day money-back guarantee. Here's a special. It's a deal for our listeners. It's limited time. Right now, you can get 55% off your Babbel subscription, but only for our listeners at babbel.com/majority. Get 55% off. For those of you who aren't good at math, that's more than half.
Whoa.
55% off at babbel.com/majority, spelled BABBEL.com/majority. Rules and restrictions may apply. Also, great gift. This is a simple one, but it's a meaningful one, and it's one that you give once, and it keeps giving. And it's also one that you can give and will definitely be used because you can make sure it's being used, despite the technological deficiencies in the person you give it to. I don't want to be mean about it, but that's the case. And I'm talking about a gift you might give your parents, your grandparents, maybe your aunts, your uncles, your sisters, yeah, even your cousins. I guess your brothers too, if you want. It is an Aura frame. And what it does is it's a digital frame, but it's the best digital frame that's out there. Wired, Wirecutter, Strategist, all have rated it number one. Why? Because it comes with unlimited storage, has simple controls on the frame. But one of the beautiful things about it is you can upload the photos and even plug in the router stuff. Like, what's the router that you're going to connect to? What's the password?
The Wi-Fi password.
The Wi-Fi password, sorry. You can do this before it's out of the box. So when your mom or your grandparents or your dad or whomever gets it and doesn't know how to set these things up, all I got to do is plug it in and it will do it automatically. Right now, you can save on the perfect gift that keeps on giving by visiting auraframes.com. For a limited time, listeners can get $20 off their best-selling frame with the code majority. That's AURA frames.com, promo code majority. Terms and conditions apply. Both of these will be in the podcast and YouTube descriptions and at majority.fm. Also, a reminder, you can get this show commercial-free by becoming a member at jointhemajorityreport.com. This is our 20th anniversary coming up on Friday. And you can help us be here for another 20 years. I said us. I'll make that clear. I don't know if I can make it another 20 years.
Hey.
I'm old.
Hey.
2044.
But also, we got some great merch. And look who has been wearing our merch about town.
I know. And not just one piece of merch, but two pieces of merch.
Usually, if you're going to wear the Majority Report merch, you do the matching set. That's the way it works. The hat and the shirt.
She really completed her outfit here.
Yep, that's right. Go ahead. We popping it up? Oh, guys? All right. We'll get there in a moment. I remember when I was years and years ago in New York, I was walking down the street and ran into, what's his name now? Chris Elliott. And he was wearing the full Letterman set. And here we have the same thing with Laverne Cox. She's wearing the hat cool. And the whoopsie shirt. So there it is. She's got music on there, but we can't play it. All right, let's get to more news. Supreme Court is hearing the mifepristone case today. There are really two questions, and I think we're going to be talking to somebody tomorrow that we will touch on this, but I just want to loop you in. There's really two questions. One is, has this been proven, this drug, which is responsible for now 50% of abortions in this country, are medically induced, I guess you would call that. And the question is whether it's safe. And this is an absurd question, or I should say an easy one to answer, because this has been in use for years. And you had, what was the number? Something like 6 million birthing people took this medication last year. I think there were 32 deaths out of the 6 million, some of whom who had other issues as well, that are even like not necessarily caused by these. Yeah, this is a legal brief from the FDA. As of December 22, 2022, 32 deaths had been reported among nearly 6 million women and birthing folks who have taken mifepristone, and some of those had obvious alternative causes such as drug overdose. There is exhaustive scientific record supporting loosening the pill's restrictions, including from the COVID-19 pandemic when the in-person requirement was temporarily suspended. There are serious side effects occurring in less than 1% of the patients. So safety's not an issue. And then the second thing that is being brought up, and I'm unclear, if this is this was certainly, part of what brought the case in front of the Supreme Court, something called the Comstock Act. And what is the Comstock Act? It is a law named after the the Postmaster General, was it? From 1873. It was written in 1873. They, written by people who apparently
postal inspector
had not heard of the Constitution. But it basically said you cannot send lewd or lascivious stuff. Here it is. Lewd, lascivious, indecent, filthy, or vile articles in the mail. It prohibits mailing anything for, quote, any indecent or immoral purpose. You get to choose, what constitutes that, I guess.
Right.
Like all federal laws. And it purports to make a crime to mail any drug that is advertised or described in a manner calculated to lead another to use or apply it for producing an abortion. And which is also sort of like a strange thing because, of course, they didn't have drugs that were manufactured specifically to induce abortion at that time, per se. Now, of course, like, if they find that you cannot mail these, the drug manufacturers presumably will find a new network in which to get this to people, but
they're part of arguing it in front of the Supreme Court today, some of the manufacturers, along with the FDA.
And so we'll get more on this, but, you can imagine that if it's a law written in 1873, well, then, of course, Clarence Thomas is like, yes, well, that must be the law of the land, because that's what our founding fathers wanted.
Right.
Yeah. I mean, the Comstock Acts, people who played BioShock Infinite, their main villain's name is Comstock. It's sort of set in sort of a late Victorian setting. It's a pretty dark Victorian style, like, history where James Joyce's Ulysses was famously stopped at the docks from being brought into America in 1921. Like, we believe ourselves as this free speech beacon, but there's an irony that all these guys who on the right talk about free speech are the ones not only like banning books in schools, but also using the Comstock Act to go after abortion.
Yeah, it's pretty it's pretty nuts. But at the end of the day, they're going to find any way they can to go after abortion rights. And this is just part of the onslaught. Let's go to this polling. Are we dancing around here? We get a lot. Oh, I want to talk about this subsidies that are ending briefly. We talked about this briefly yesterday, or at least we headlined it. But there are two things to keep an eye out for, stuff that's ending because of this budget, because Republicans are just not going to allow it, and because Joe Manchin inhibited the Build Back Better bill, and, version 1, 2, and 3 even. We won't have Manchin in cinema next go-round, but we also may not have a democratically controlled Senate or a Democratic president or a Democratic House.
Right.
We'll see. But the Affordable Connectivity Program, $14 billion from the federal government, subsidized more than 23 million households, receiving either reduced bills or essentially free internet service through the program. This is going to run out at the end of May. And then in May, internet companies have the options to provide them with partial discounts using the remaining federal funding. Nationalize the whole thing. Nationalize the whole thing, as far as I'm concerned.
Yep.
We are also losing subsidies. Now I've lost this now. That's what I've got. I'm sorry. I'm a little bit disorganized
No,
today,
it's okay.
folks. All right, let's go to the one other thing that came out in terms of like the election in the fall. House Republicans made a mistake of actually letting people know what their plans are. And it's interesting. There was a story today in, I think it was Axios, saying that the House Republican leadership and just the Republican leadership more broadly are concerned that their House members are only trying to run against Joe Biden, and they are finding that it's not working, that people are actually expecting the Republicans to have a plan. And again, I know I've been a broken record on this, but the idea that the Biden administration is not running against the do-nothing Congress, which you could easily tie into Donald Trump, because more often than not, they're not doing anything because Donald Trump has told them, is a huge missed opportunity. But with that said, if they get a chance to do something, I don't think you're going to like it.
No.
The proposed 2025 budget coming out of the Republican Study Committee, which is made up of more than 170 House Republicans, vast majority of the Republican caucus. And I got news for you, the other 50 are probably to the right of this. They, despite the fact that they all screamed when he said you're trying to cut Social Security, they will start with increasing the retirement age to qualify for Social Security and lowering the benefits for the highest earning beneficiaries. So that's two things here. One is it's a cut to Social Security. If you increase, and for those of you who don't know, you can retire right now at age 62 and draw Social Security, but it's going to be a lesser amount than you will if you get it at 65. And in fact, 66 in a couple of months, I think right now, is the age in when you retire for full benefits. And it's going up to 67 for people my age. They want to raise this even higher, which basically means that it's a cut. There's no other way to describe it. It is a cut to Social Security. On top of which, if they lower benefits for the highest earning beneficiaries, how do you think they do that? They develop some type of means testing. And this is also an incredible waste and will make Social Security more difficult to access for everybody, because we've got to means test everybody and make sure that you all aren't high earning income individuals. We have a way to means test Social Security right now, and it is called taxation. If we are worried about wealthy people getting too much Social Security, we have a very easy mechanism in which to claw some of that money back, and it is called taxation. We already have a mechanism to do this. It's called the IRS. We don't need to create a new bureaucracy to means test. We can means test every single thing in this country by using taxes. We should be doing this with everything. You should be able to get Medicare or Medicaid. You should be able to get a whole host of benefits. And at the end of the year, if we've deemed that you are making more money than you need to get these benefits in part or in full, we simply tax that money back. And it's a very easy way of doing this. And it's very, very, the reason why Republicans don't want to do it that way is because they want to create hurdles for people to access this stuff. They want people to be frustrated with government because they're making me dance through all these hoops. That's what they're talking about here. Then, if that's not enough, they want to mess with Social Security, the single most successful government program probably we've had in this country, maybe ever. Keeps 2/3 of our elderly out of poverty. And when your parents are not having to eat cat food in their retirement, you can save money to send your kid to college or to buy a home or whatever it is. They have a plan for Medicare too, and it's called basically privatization.
Yep.
They call it a premium support model. This is what Paul Ryan wanted to do, which is we just subsidize your private. It's basically Obamacare, but for everybody. And not even the good parts of Obamacare. It is the privatized part of Obamacare as opposed to the expansion of Medicaid. And I am sure if they're in a position to do this, they're also going to say insurance companies can rip you off like they used to.
Of course.
And then we should also say they also, in their budget, even though it has nothing to do with money, that Life Begins at Conception Act, which would grant rights to embryos. And if you grant rights to embryos, I have a feeling these embryos are going to rise up and say, hey, wait a second, this whole IVF thing,
Yeah.
part of us get thrown out. We're not going to want to do that.
We don't want to do that, and it's really cold in the freezer where we're kept. So
Exactly. And they will just scream and scream, those embryos. And the bacilli, or what is it called? Bacillats?
I have no idea.
Blastocytes. Also, we should just add that the Republican Study Committee in their 2025 budget, which involves fiscal sanity to save America, instead of raising taxes on really wealthy people, it calls for a rollback of free lunch. In fact, a ban on free lunches. They want to eliminate the community eligibility provision from the school lunch program, which allows certain schools to provide free lunches regardless of the individual eligibility of each student.
Democrats should run on this. Democrats should put, like the way Tim Walz did in Minnesota, this should be just like every governor in the country begin to certify free lunches for school, for kids in school.
But you see the dilemma that the Republicans have.
Well, this is a wish list to head off, like, essentially the criticism of Mike Johnson for getting Democratic votes on his budget, I'd imagine. That's the strategy, right?
Well, this has been in works even before that, I think. I mean, the problem they have is that when they come out with their proposals, they realize no one likes these.
Yeah.
And so they have literally nothing to run on. The Democrats, at least, by not fulfilling a whole host of their promises that people want, at least have stuff to claim that they're running for. But Republicans, even in theory, the only thing they can run on is their racism and xenophobia, but that has a lid on it, frankly. And so they are stuck in this problem of not being able to offer really
anything
beyond we're going to protect you from the non-existent caravan that is marching in our way. Let's talk about the most encouraging polling that Biden has seen in a while. Again, let me just read a couple of quotes from this Axios thing. There was a GOP's top fundraising committee for state level leaders says that Biden doesn't hurt candidates down ballot in the way that some presidents have in the past, which is, I think, something that we've all been aware of. Like, there is a unique problem with Joe Biden as a candidate. But broadly speaking, people like the Democratic policies and Democrats more than the Republicans, at least in this context. The memo advised steer clear of making the election a singular referendum on Joe Biden. Now, the problem is that's exactly what Joe Biden also wants. Don't make this a referendum on me.
Yeah.
Make it a question of choosing between me and Donald Trump. So they have a challenge here. The memo advised using Biden as your crutch. It said campaigns need to make an affirmative case for GOP policies. The problem is that nobody likes the GOP policies. They much rather prefer "Let's go Brandon" as a campaign slogan. We must learn from the missteps of 2022 cycle and not solely target Joe Biden in our campaign messaging. They got nothing else.
But they have nothing else to message with. That's the problem. The problem for the Republicans is because Trump and the fact that they are Republicans. The problem with for the Democrats is that, in fact, actually things for them domestically are set up quite well in terms of negative partisanship. But Biden is so demobilizing and is seemingly making all the wrong choices over the past year or so that it's a question of, does he sufficiently depress turnout so that that advantage doesn't necessarily matter. But it seems like his State of the Union actually did have an effect. I thought the speech was good politically. Like, it was like, okay, he's beginning to go on the offensive. And the polling seems to reflect that, even though there was some skepticism about whether it would change anything.
Were you here that day after?
It was the day after I left for vacation. So yeah.
Yeah, no, I mean, well, I think we were talking to, I can't remember who it was. Was it Ryan Grimm or was it Digby? I found this State of the Union speech. I mean, aside from the fact that, I'm angry about the Israel-Gaza stuff, and I don't think I would have liked him to address that more and up front. I thought the speech was a huge win for him.
Yeah.
The quick polling afterwards did not show any bump, but go and Google how many times people have said he's old and can't do the job since then. I like that. It killed that entire narrative.
He also was emphasizing Social Security and Medicare in the speech and taxing the rich. And then we saw a week later that polling that we highlighted about how when you emphasize Social Security and Medicare versus Trump, it gives
Biden he has like
a
a 55 to...
it was 51 or something, but still sizable compared to the neck and neck stuff.
These are, of course, the most important polls because they are polling 6 key swing states. There was significant shift. This is from the Bloomberg poll, and it's registered voters, so they haven't really yet built a good model, I think, this far out of who the likely voters are. That's the big question, like who are the likely voters? But in terms of registered voters, this is even more surprising in some respects because I think likely voters might be a better indication. But almost 5,000 registered voters has a margin of error of only 1 percentage point. Biden leads Trump by 1 point after trailing him by 4 points in February in Wisconsin. In Pennsylvania, the candidates are tied after Trump held a 6-point lead last month. And they are also tied in Michigan.
It's also a question, too, of Trump having to be more visible. And people go, oh, right.
Trump's more visible. The poll is also finding that people feel better about the national economy with a gradual increase in the number of swing state voters who say it's on the right track. Biden also made some ground up in Nevada, Arizona, and North Carolina, and is still, and Trump is actually added to his lead in Georgia, which is interesting. And that could have been a function of like the Fani Willis thing.
That too.
But in Nevada, it's a 2-point race. In North Carolina, it's a 6-point race, although that's closing. In Georgia, it's a 7-point race with Biden going down a little bit, actually. Trump seeming to just hold steady. And in Arizona, it is a +5. Now, Arizona, there's going to be an abortion rights ballot referendum that's going to be on the ballot.
Huge.
And that supposedly will help.
Well, especially because Arizona has one of the most draconian abortion bans on the books. It was passed in the 1800s, and the Supreme Court in the state is currently weighing whether or not it's constitutional or not. So, like, in terms of that being a driver to the polls, I think the Republicans should be very worried about Arizona and all of the trends that we've seen over the past few years. I know the polling is kind of neck and neck right now, but we saw Kari Lake lose. We saw, Mark Kelly win as well. So, and the governorship, Katie Hobbs. So I think that the Democrats are in okay shape in Arizona. That might be part of Biden's border calculation, which I still think is a massive mistake. But any state where abortion is on the ballot, I feel better about the Democrats' chances.
And I mentioned the other day that Biden is sort of teeing up perhaps some executive action to, I don't know what the best articulation, make this country more hostile to immigrants and those seeking asylum.
Yep.
It's horrible. And really, I mean, in many respects, I think like the biggest drag, obviously, on the Biden administration is, I think, the Israel-Gaza policy. And I think in the same way that, there was a sort of a second order bounce that came from the State of the Union address, I think part of that was also, it was the first time that he basically chastised Israel in public. He didn't go nearly far enough as far as I was concerned, but I think that for some people, I think that helped on some level. The biggest, I think, was just that it, put to bed for the time being that the narrative that he's too old to be president. He's still obviously old, but it was the first time he also was like, did it with a sense of humor about being old. But the thing that I think people are missing, and I say this in part just from my own sort of experience, but really more from talking to a couple of people who are in the sort of like democratic activist community. People who are not necessarily aligned with the Democratic Party, but often work to push Democrats and push them to the left. And also, attempt to drive voters out, et cetera, et cetera. And a lot of these people are very demoralized, just simply based upon what Biden's doing. It just makes their job for them just to personally do harder. Never mind that they're running into friction, because a lot of these groups obviously are out there trying to get young people involved and voting and organizing young people. And young people did not grow up with a deified version of Israel. Young people did not grow up with the sense that Palestinians are subhuman. They did not grow up with the idea that, like, well, some people have to leave, land because other people want it. It's one of those things that happens.
Yeah. I mean, younger people see the Palestinian cause as a racial justice cause. That's explicitly what it is. And obviously it's the anti-Semitism on TikTok that's indoctrinating everybody. Just kidding. It's people seeing the daily humiliations of the Palestinian people, and then now the genocide, which I think the images are so harrowing that when you see it on social media, that's what to explain the extreme divide. I
think the social media is a big part of it, because if you were to follow the American news only and did not have access to Instagram or TikTok or even Twitter, you would hear virtually nothing that was particularly critical of Israel. And I would imagine that even the stuff that you do hear that is critical of Israel would be less so, because they wouldn't be consuming the social media. And I think this has had and I think, how people get their news is also, relevant in this because it's just much harder. There's a much more direct communication between what's going on the ground. I mean, I've talked to people who are just like, there's no, like we even saw that clip of Dan Goldman, who was questioned by a protester. How can you support this? And I don't trust the numbers. I don't, et cetera, et cetera. This is after Joe Biden had said 30,000 in the State of the Union address. There's a Washington Post piece out today.
Yep.
That is basically saying that all the experts we've spoken to say that this is probably a significant undercount.
Of course it is. We haven't gotten an update on the 31 to 32,000 dead numbers in close to a month by this point. And famine, it has spread at this point. I mean, mass starvation and famine is in Gaza right now. So let alone the 32,000 numbers that haven't been updated don't even reflect the people missing under the rubble. So it's a significant undercount by thousands. I think that's safe to say at this point. But apparently,
somebody's saying Instagram Meta is doing all kinds of crazy to block content about Gaza. Well, they made an announcement about 2 or 3 months ago, that they were going to inhibit all political posts from traveling outside of your friend group, unless I think you go into your own settings.
I don't know if they announced that. I think they.
Oh, they did. No, I've seen the article.
No, I mean, like, I think a lot of people were surprised by it.
Oh, I don't think they told they told people on Instagram.
Right.
No one got a push notification.
No, I just read that.
Yeah.
So it was public information, but they just didn't tell their people.
Right.
They didn't tell people they didn't tell their users. But they, screw you guys. You don't have to. But the other sort of like element that I think is missing from this conversation about how Biden's Israel policy is stepping all over his campaign is, I mentioned this last week, but it bears repeating. 16 Republican attorney generals from around the country have sued the Biden administration on Thursday over its pause on federal permits for new liquid natural gas exports. Now, we've talked about this a couple of times, but I would imagine that the vast majority of people who are listening to me right now go like, what? The Biden administration at the beginning of February had to make a decision about permitting the construction of liquid natural gas export facilities that, according to Bill McKibben, when I interviewed him about this in late January, I think it was going to be responsible for more carbon than any other thing that we've been talking about, single thing that we've been talking about over the past couple of years. Keystone XL, the Willow Project. When I spoke to him, he was getting ready to go down to D.C. and get arrested with about another 50 people to try and inhibit the permitting of this export facilities. Because once you build the export facilities, that is a sunk cost that has to be recouped.
Yeah.
And means more liquid natural gas has got to be pulled out of the ground by investors. If you signal to investors, you're not going to be able, you can pull it out of the ground, but if you can't sell it, which is what's going on with this country right now, all our massive fossil fuel production that we're producing, more than any other country at any other time, has been for export. And as soon as you say, like, we're not going to expand our ability to export this stuff, it's going to be that much more expensive to export stuff. Then you dry up the investment in pulling it out of the ground in the first place. And when the Biden administration paused these permits indefinitely, because this is the way they do it, right? You pause it and then you just sort of, it goes away.
Slow walk it, yeah.
You slow walk it because it also drains all the investment out of it.
Yep.
Money's going to go somewhere else. Bill McKibben said it was the first time a president has ever said no to the fossil fuel industry. He said this was huge. And no one heard about it. No one talked about it. No one trumpeted it because it is, being stepped on as a political story by the Biden administration's rabid refusal to recognize what is going on in Gaza, and rabid refusal to in any way exercise any of our leverage to get it to stop.
We're more than not just exercising leverage. I mean, I guess this is a way to, do we have that Bernie Sanders statement, Sam? I mean,
yeah, this is like we said in headlined, Blinken came out today, and where is the, let's pull up what Blinken said first. I lost the, let's see if I have this. So we've been following this and waiting for this, that I got it here. There had been pressure building in the Senate around December, I think it was. I think Bernie Sanders had introduced a resolution. You don't need a law because there's already a law, that there has to be a certification by the Secretary of State that when the U.S. is sending military weapons, that they are not being used in a way that is a violation of international law. One of those things that is a violation of international law, and also the subsequent law that the U.S. passed that restricts the sale of weapons to other countries, is you cannot block U.S. humanitarian aid. Now, it is beyond obvious. I don't care if you're the greatest Israel Zionist supporter in the history of the world. The fact that the U.S. has to build a port.
Yeah.
The fact that the U.S. has to airdrop, very unsafe for people, obviously. Humanitarian aid into Gaza is irrefutable evidence that Israel is preventing it from entering there because there are roads, there are checkpoints that this aid could be flowing through. 500 trucks a day before this conflict started. And the Israelis are bragging about allowing 100 trucks here and there occasionally into Gaza. But every single person that we've interviewed on this program, every single expert who is on the ground there, there is no one other than the IDF or the Israeli government that has said anything other than Israel is inhibiting aid. In fact, Biden said it in the State of the Union.
Exactly. Blinken said it. Blinken was saying 100%. Last week, he said 100% of the people in Gaza are at the risk of starvation. And that is unacceptable. I'm paraphrasing, but he did say, I think, the 100% figure. And then within days, he comes around and says that this is not a violation of international law. I mean, the other thing that the State Department is doing here, which is just, it is so despicable here. Do we have this Matthew Miller thing? Let's play this, if you don't mind, Sam.
No.
Because there's this flagrant disrespect for international law here, where don't believe your lying eyes, ears, our own intelligence reports, our own senators like Chris Van Hollen that have gone there. Israel is not violating international law, so don't worry, we won't put some sort of padlock on the arms that we're selling to them. That's part of why they're saying this. And it also saves face for the United States, which could be potentially complicit in genocidal war crimes if they were to admit this in public. So let's be clear that there's also a self-interest involved in this. But this was Matt Miller being asked about this other action where the United States is thumbing its nose at international law, where the United Nations Security Council passed the ceasefire resolution. The United States abstained. It is unequivocal in the United Nations Charter that UN Security Council resolutions are binding under international law. And yet, fairly immediately after this, the ceasefire proposal was passed, the United States is claiming that it is not binding, that it is just the United States, and through the negotiations where the authority where the authority lies, which is placing yourself above the United Nations Charter, which is not the role that the United States is supposed to be playing in international law if you care about a rules-based international order. So,
which we don't.
We don't. But this made this incredibly clear here.
Come back to you.
Council resolution. You said that it's non-binding, but some others are also arguing that it is binding, like several other UN Security Council resolutions. Has there been any, is there any ongoing discussion about this at the UN between the US representatives and others? And also, I remember it was last November, the UN Security Council also adopted a resolution calling for extended and urgent humanitarian pauses and corridors in Gaza, which was binding and which was rejected by Israel, like several other UN Security Council resolutions in the past. So will the US encourage Israel to comply with UN resolutions and international law if Israel is not above the law?
So with respect to the first resolution, it is our interpretation of this resolution that it is non-binding. And for any detail on that, I would refer you to the office of our ambassador to the United Nations, who can, of course, speak in more detail of how we reached that conclusion. With respect to the other resolution, of course, we always expect all of our partner nations to comply with international law, and I'll leave it at that.
Okay, so, of course. This is I know that the average American doesn't really care about international law, but I find this to be a really shocking display of arrogance from a Biden administration that said they were going to come into office and again establish a rules-based international order, bring things back to normal. So there have been now, within the past week or so, 3 complete middle fingers to the concept of international law from the United States State Department. The first one was last week, which we covered, which was this fake ceasefire resolution that they proposed, which in essence placed United States and Israel authority and the negotiators' authority over the United Nations Security Council by saying this is a ceasefire resolution that just in essence says we support the negotiations that lead to a ceasefire. Essentially undercutting the enforcement authority of the United Nations Security Council, saying the buck stops actually with us. This is just an effort to say, rah, rah, here we go. Now, the second one is that instance there, where Matt Miller there is just denying the explicit language of the United Nations Charter, which says that Security Council resolutions are binding. This is unambiguous. A typical display of United States arrogance in the face of international law. And the third one is exactly what we just discussed, which is lying to the world and saying that the U.S. that Israel is in compliance with international law and is not blocking humanitarian aid in order to not put a padlock on any future arms sales to Israel from the United States. These are really provocative actions, in my view, on the world stage. And the Biden administration is not going to be kindly looked upon in history, and I'm putting that mildly, obviously.
Here's Bernie Sanders responding to the proclamation by Blinken that, quote, or the State Department, we have not found them, meaning the Israelis, to be in violation either when it comes to the conduct of the war or the provision of humanitarian assistance. I mean, what would be a violation of restricting humanity? Like
them
literally
preferred ally.
Well, no, but I'm saying like them shooting down U.S. Planes dropping the aid.
Maybe.
Would that constitute it?
Maybe.
Or would you need to mine the waters off of Gaza so that if a U.S. ship came in there and blew it up? I mean, like, what would inhibit the humanitarian aid more than what Israel is doing? It's absurd. But here is Bernie Sanders. This is the statement that he released. 32,000 Palestinians in Gaza have been killed, almost 75,000 injured, 2/3 of whom are women and children. Some 60% of the housing units have been damaged or destroyed, and almost all medical facilities have been made inoperable. Today, hundreds of thousands of Palestinian children are facing starvation because Netanyahu won't let in sufficient humanitarian aid, while thousands of trucks are waiting to get into Gaza. To pretend that Israel is not violating international law or interfering with U.S. humanitarian aid is absurd on its face. The State Department's position makes a mockery of U.S. law and assurances provided to Congress. It really is just stunning. And the Biden administration continues to delude itself that nobody cares. I mean, someone just IM'd asking if Ding Dong. Given voters' lack of interest in foreign policy and how quickly people move on to the next thing, how much do you think Israel-Gaza will be an issue in November? Again, first off, it's unclear to me when this gets resolved and by how. If the U.S. will not take this opportunity, and now it goes, the State Department has until May 8th to justify to the Senate. So that's another 6 weeks. I cannot see the inflection point, which is going to cause the Biden administration at this point to inhibit what Israel is doing. Maybe they've drawn some type of red line at Rafah. But it seems very difficult to sort of be able to point to some type of like trigger, which is going to change U.S. policy at this point. And if U.S. policy does not change, and I'm not saying that U.S. policy would necessarily get Israel to stop what it's doing. I don't know that there is something that could do that. But the fact that it's an open question is because we haven't done it.
Yeah.
So if there's nothing that changes in U.S. policy, I'm not convinced that like this is going to be so far in the rear view mirror that people are going to forget about it. I mean, who knows? If someone who wants to tell me like why they think this war is going to end, why Israel is going to stop this onslaught, and particularly each time the U.S. does this, it's a signal to Netanyahu of like we're not even all bark. Never mind not being any bite. We don't even bark that much. And where is the incentive for Netanyahu to stop?
There's none, because then also if he stops, then there's the potential for new elections. It's actually every disincentive unless the United States provides an incentive to stop.
And the incentive that the U.S. would provide would be more or less like basically a signal to the Israeli people that this is being mishandled, and you need to you need to essentially public opinion needs to change there.
I mean, and again, the Israel has its own almost self-sustaining kind of arms situation to a degree where they could keep this up for a while. But what is even more valuable is U.S. diplomatic support.
Yep.
And this display in front of the United Nations when they, Linda Thomas Greenfield abstains and grimaces as she does it, and then 2 hours later says that the UN ceasefire resolution is non-binding. That is an anachronism, and it's also an insult to like the spirit of the United Nations, which I know is a Western construction, and the allies at the end of the war had a huge hand in it, and it's completely tilted against the global South. But if
it's more democratic now than it was then.
But if we're going to build on anything internationally to make it so that like we have created a just world, the United States should be at the bare minimum not undercutting the very concept of UN Security Council's supremacy in matters of this one, based on its own kind of arrogant bloviation about its commitment to this settler colonial project in the Middle East.
And wait as someone finds out that Israel exists because of the UN.
Right. Right.
Like, I mean, that is the amazing thing about this.
Again, a
pick
less democratic.
and choose which resolutions. 181, I got no problem with that one. It's just like 242, and it's...
They started letting a lot of more countries in after that.
Yeah.
But we wonder why we weren't able to mobilize the world against Russia. It's because we aren't sincere about any of this shit. We're just not. About like global democracy and all that stuff. Like this was always the glaring like sort of thing that other countries are like, maybe we oppose of that using war to change borders, but America is not serious about any of this.
And I think I read somewhere that the video that was released of Israel droning those 4 boys who were clearly unarmed, and maybe they had a pen, maybe they had a knife on them, but I mean, clearly not carrying any type of weapons, were, if they were militants of any kind, really following a protocol of just sort of like strolling in the middle of a road, targeted them. And this is in like 4K. We can see this. This isn't like the video that caused the uproar of Iraq that was shot in 2007 and leaked, I think it was in 2010, via now Chelsea Manning and WikiLeaks. That created a huge uproar. And in this country, that video, which showed the 4 boys being struck by a a drone strike. And then when one kid survived, walking away, partly limping, it killed him. The uproar is happening in the rest of the world. This is the thing that I think like we're completely oblivious to in this country, is that video has gone around to everywhere, and Israel is, aside from Israel being a increasingly a pariah state, it's also completely undercut one of the bedrock selling points that Joe Biden was making in running for election in 2020, which is, I'm going to repair America's reputation around the world.
People should Google Jordan protests, Syria protests. Look at the footage in the streets. It is, the amount of hatred towards the United States cannot be overstated, specifically in the region that we have been extracting from for its oil and ravaging with wars and bombs and drone strikes for decades at this point, culminating in like our client state here essentially, or
Does make
whatever.
us safer?
Sorry.
Does make us safer?
Yeah.
Supporting this around
It does,
the world? Does
right.
it make me safer going around New York? What are we sacrificing this kind of safety for?
I think it makes everyone less unsafe. It makes Jewish people in this country less safe. For us to be consistently conflating Zionism with Judaism, it makes Muslim people in this country much less safe. There have been hate crimes towards both groups, in part because we uphold this fiction of Israel as reparations for the Holocaust, and we put it within this deeply bloody and horrific historical context, when in fact it really is just about Western might.
All right, we got to take a break, head into the fun half. I
think we may have some fun with some of this NBC drama, at least.
Yes, that'll be fun.
Yeah.
We'll have some fun. We got some fun clips, but that was the more somber part of the show.
Yeah.
And now it's all going to be bright and cheery.
As a culture war up on the right between the Christ is King folks, should we call them, and on Candace Owens' side, and Ben Shapiro's folks.
Yep.
It's getting ugly out here.
Oh, it's getting really ugly out there. We got a clip of what's his name again? Dave Rubin.
Yeah.
Getting very angry at a young woman who raised my name in front of him. Said the name that shall not be mentioned.
Tale as old as time.
Yeah, such a loser.
And all that and more, ladies and gentlemen. It is, of course, the 20th anniversary week. The Majority Report, actually, it's like one of them. It's the 20th anniversary year of the Majority Report. We got a great show for you on Friday. It's going to be a lot of fun. It's going to be like a real walk down memory lane. I just got a clip. Did you see that clip I put in there that Kyle sent me of the first Majority Report ever?
Whoa.
We'll play the first couple of minutes of that. Well, it's actually the second. It's technically the second. But I'm measuring it from like when it became professional.
The first official one.
Maybe we'll play also like a clip of like the one from FMU. Yeah. That was when Benjamin was in live. We'll get to that. We're going to have new merch that we'll probably hopefully have in the store on Friday. Folks, it's your support that has made this show possible in one form or another over the past 20 years. Back in the day, Air America wanted to fire us multiple times. And it was people sending emails and people saying, don't do that. And then when in 2010, we started this show, it took me like 5 years to even take like a yearly payment for the show, because I was like, I don't know if we're gonna be able to do this, and in 6 months. But it is our members that have made the show possible. And if you listen to the show on any type of regular basis, Your support makes this show possible. You can become a member at jointhemajorityreport.com. Jointhemajorityreport.com. Also, become a member of our Discord, majoritydiscord.com. Emma.
ESPN.
Oh, I got a story for you. My buddy,
I saw what
E.
you sent
Lawson,
me. Yeah,
has written a book. We're gonna get him on. He's written a book about a big scandal in the NCAA.
I hate the NCAA, so I'm all for that. We'll be talking. I want to talk to him for sure. We also, on ESPN, we spoke about the Kim Mulkey expose coming up, Sweet 16 preview, as well as some NFL rule changes and an update on the NHL playoff race, youtube.com/ESPN show.
Matt.
Tonight on Left Reckoning, Benjamin Case joins us to talk about his piece in Inkstick magazine, looking at using sort of pre-existing criteria about conflict to basically go contrary to how the Israel-Hamas war, as Wikipedia calls it, is classified, and said uses the actual classification using, again, these pre-existing criteria is that this is a massacre, a colonial massacre specifically. So we'll get into how we define those terms objectively tonight, patreon.com/leftreckoning.
See you in the fun half. 646-257-3920. Left is best. Jamie and I may have a disagreement.
Yeah, you can't just say whatever you want about people just because you're rich.
I have an absolute right to mock them on YouTube.
He's up there buggy whipping like he's the boss.
I am not your employer.
You know, I'm tired of the negativity.
I'm sorry, I didn't mean to upset you. You're nervous, you're a little bit upset, you're riled up.
Yeah, maybe you should rethink your defense of that, you fucking idiots.
We're just going to get rid of you.
All right.
But dude. You want to smoke this joint?
Yes.
Do you feel like you are a dinosaur?
That's some good shit.
Exactly. I'm happy now.
It's a win-win.
It's a win-win-win.
Oh, hell yeah.
Now listen to me. 2, 3, 4, 5 times. 847-906-501-457. 2, 38, 56, 27. 1 half. 5 eighths. 3.9 billion.
Wow.
He's the ultimate math nerd.
Don't you see?
Why don't you get a real job instead of spewing vitriol and hatred, you left-wing Limbaugh?
Everybody's taking their dumb juice today.
Come on, Sammy.
Dance, dance, dance.
Rand Paul.
I had my first post-coital scene with a woman. I'm hoping to add more moves to my repertoire. All I have is the dip and the swirl.
Fine, we can double dip.
Yes, this is a perfect moment.
No.
Wait, what?
You make under $1 million a year. You're scum. You're nothing.
Excuse me? Fuck you, you fucking liberal elite. I think you belong in jail.
Thank you for saying that, Sam. You're a horrible, despicable person.
All right, gonna take a quick break. I want to take a moment to talk to some of the libertarians out there. Take whatever vehicle you want to drive to the library. What you're talking about is jibber jabber.
Classic. I'm feeling more chill already.
Good. Donald Trump can kiss all of our asses.
Hey, Sam. Hey, Andy. You guys ready to do some evil?
Hitler was such an idiot.
That guy might be a Nazi.
Agree.
No.
Death to America.
You.
Yes.
Wow.
Wow, that's weird. No way! Unbelievable. This guy's got a really good hook. Throw our hands up.
Ooh.
Wow.
But Sam, I gotta get off.
No worries. Let's. I want to just flesh this out a little bit. I mean, look, it's a free speech issue. If you don't like me,
Hey, shut up.
Thank you for calling into the Majority Report. Sam will be with you shortly.
we are back. Sam Seder, Emma Vigeland on the Majority Report. A couple of IMs we'll get to. South Carolina Socialist. Will Janine be on the show this week? Would be such a cool reunion. Yes, I will be talking to Janine.